You're gonna need a bigger boat. So simple.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 668 for December 29th, 2025, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Thanks for joining us, everybody, for what is our last show of the calendar year 2025, but it is not the end of our 2025 campaign.
We're close.
As our longtime listeners may know, we tend to extend into the new year by another week or so. Our award show this year, our top 10, our InSession Film Awards, that is going to be episode 670. So if you're paying attention to the numbers there, that means we are 2 weeks away, meaning that with this episode 668 and next week episode 669, that will be the end of our 2025 campaign. So despite the year coming to an end as of this week, and we do hope everyone had a great Christmas and are preparing for a fun New Year's, we actually have a couple of more weeks left before we transition to the film calendar 2026. That'll be about mid-January. That's how we tend to roll here. So we're still in 2025 mode. And that means, because we are a couple of weeks away from the InSession Film Awards, we have catch up to do. We've seen some movies that we want to talk about as we continue to do our 2025 homework. And also, that means it is time to delve into the best scenes of the year. And we're going to do this a little bit differently than what we've typically done in the past.
Yeah. I'm excited.
I'm excited as well. We're going to be doing a top 10 this year, not a top 5, but a top 10 scenes of the year. So on this episode, we are going to discuss picks 10 through 6. And then next week on the show, episode 669, we will finish out this exercise by talking about our 5 through 1 picks. Our top 5 scenes of the year will be next week on the show. So we're going to split this up into 2 parts as we talk about the best scenes of the year.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised we haven't done it this way before, because we've done a few year-end themed episodes leading into each year's award shows. Sometimes there are topics maybe around performances, maybe underrated movies against the grain movies, which are movies that maybe you and I didn't quite fall into the general consensus within one way or another. Yeah. But we always put the most stock into our best scenes of the year. And that is also the most stressful exercise, to the point that when we get to the end of those top 5 episodes and we're doing our honorable mentions, they sometimes take longer than the actual top 5 portion itself. So maybe this is a way of kind of remedying that a little bit.
It's a great way to expand that discussion. It's always a lot of fun. And last year, we didn't really do any other table setting for the awards aside from our top 5 scenes, because we were so busy catching up with movies that the last 3 main shows leading into that award show were all catch-up episodes.
Yeah, well, last year was just kind of silly as far as release calendars and release schedules were, because I felt like everything that we needed to at least acknowledge in some way was coming out all at once. And it just made for a crowding experience that we really had no choice but to do it that way. But that was certainly outside the norm for us as far as our usual cadence. But scenes of the year tends to be the final episode of sorts before we get into our actual award show. And that is one that is, at least for me, and it sounds like it is for you, that is the one I'm most excited to do, not including the award show itself. Like when we talk about our year-end celebrations, talking about scenes of the year is something that really speaks to us. And this is a great way to keep that going.
Yeah, exactly. It's always a really insightful, fun, thorough conversation. And I love that we are expanding that. We hope everyone else enjoys it as well. Before we get to that, though, as we did last week on the show, we have a little bit more catch-up that we wanted to talk about before we get to the top 5. We'll try to be as brief as we can here, because the top 5 tends to go pretty lengthy when you're talking
More-
about
it's more
your
important.
favorite scenes of the year. So let's quickly go through a few films here. Looking at Brendan's Letterboxd, I saw your thoughts, your rating for Wicked for Good. I had a little bit of a chuckle.
Are we starting there? Really?
I want to start here. Yes. I want to get your thoughts on Wicked for Good. I had a great, lovely conversation with Erica Richards. Love her. Had a fun conversation about Wicked for Good. So my thoughts are already on the record. But Brendan, what did you think about Wicked for Good?
Should I just read my very brief letterbox review for this one?
Sure, go for it.
This movie could have been an email.
It could, yeah.
It really
fair.
could
Yeah.
have. It doesn't do anything to alleviate any concerns I had going into it, knowing that it was Act 2 of the musical. And we were very clear about that when Wicked Part 1 first came out last year, that we love the musical Wicked, where we at least really enjoy it, but we mostly enjoy Act 1. That's where the best songs are. It's where it also functions as what I think a better complete story with its own thematic arc, and still leaves things kind of open to tie into the Wizard of Oz and the lore and the mythology of the Wizard of Oz without being so literally tied to the events of the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Act 2 for me of the musical has always felt like fan service with lesser songs to support it. And honestly, that's how the film felt for me. It doesn't feel any, aesthetically different from Part 1, which is kind of a bummer. And we had some negative things to say about the way that film looked and felt. I'm still not fully convinced that I buy into John M. Chu as a great director of movie musicals. I think he's okay. I still think the best film he's probably made is Crazy Rich Asians, and that was a much smaller, more contained movie. And I think he probably operates best in that type of wheelhouse. I just don't think he's the right guy for the extravagance of something like Wicked. And given the confines of the story of Act 2 already, Wicked for Good just really couldn't do much. And the way it tries to expand on some of that lore, I think it picks the wrong ways to do it. I can't say the movie is a total bust, primarily because I still think Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande are very good in their respective roles. I do like the idea that Part 2 here, Wicked for Good specifically, does function more as the Glinda movie, whereas Wicked Part 1 was more of the Elphaba movie. Like, it kind of feels like there is a perspective shift in some ways, and I like that idea. And they're at least compelling on screen together, which gives the movie a slight edge to say that it's not the worst movie of the year, which is like the most backhanded compliment thing I could say to give it. But it does not work for me. Sadly, I was not with this one.
Yeah, I echo a lot of what you said. For those that listen to the review, you'll already know I wasn't a big fan of that film either. It's interesting what you're saying about Glinda, though, because one of the talking points that I had in that conversation with Erica is that I feel like Glinda is relegated to the background through a significant chunk of this film.
I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think it's primarily just given the narrative thrust of what Act 2, and in this case, what For Good is doing, that it feels more so about the fabrication of this new government and how she has to carry the burden of this new facade, these new lies.
Yeah.
So, like, in a way, the conflict feels more reliant on Glinda as a personality, if that makes sense, which is why I feel like there maybe is more of her in that regard. But sadly, I don't necessarily disagree that the way the movie expands on certain elements of the lore of the Wizard of Oz, it does sometimes relegate Ariana Grande to the background. But then there are moments where she isn't in the background. It feels like she kind of overtakes the movie.
Well, she's shoehorned into a lot of places where she isn't in the original source material in stage
On the
musical.
stage,
And I think that could be born out of what you're saying in terms of it's supposed to be this perspective shift. Maybe she is supposed to have more of a visionary lead here. And so how do we remedy this? Well, we're going to shoehorn her into Wonderful. We're going to create this wedding sequence that isn't there in the musical. And of course, she gets Girl in the Bubble as well.
Well, the Girl in the Bubble, that bummed me out so much because it is lyrically and musically probably the least consequential song in all of Part 2. And yet it's also simultaneously, I think, the best shot of them all.
Yeah.
So I was like so annoyed
Yeah.
by that.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that as well, because I keep hearing this a lot. So I'm clearly in a minority here, which is funny enough, given that neither of us are all that high on this film to begin with. So I don't know
Yeah.
how much this actually matters or carries any sort of weight. But I think Girl in the Bubble is 10 times better, the sequence, than the original song we get here with Alphaba. And I think it's
Oh,
because
I
of
agree,
all
yeah.
those issues with Glinda. She's shoehorned in, gets lost in the shuffle a lot. It feels like her journey in this film is so disjointed that that's the one moment where the film kind of pauses to actually give us insight into that character and how she feels.
Oh, I agree with that. I think it's also just it's the one moment where it feels like John M. Chu tried to do some interesting things as a
Yeah,
filmmaker.
that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And we got that a little bit in Wicked Part 1, such as the dancing through life sequence. I didn't love the lighting of that sequence, but I was at least kind of enamored by the choreography, some of the long takes that were employed there, the fact that it was mostly indoors, so you can actually kind of sense that the sets were at least a little bit practical and not and not full of desaturated green screen trickery, even though I know much of this may not have actually been on green screen according to the behind the scenes footage, which I don't buy for a second. But
It's crazy, the set design that we have seen in those behind the scenes photos, because none of it feels like it's there on
it
camera.
doesn't. No,
It's wild.
it just goes to show how much you can kind of ruin great production design work given how you choose to capture it with the camera and what you choose to do with the color grading. And that's what I think this movie severely
It's
fumbles on.
so banal visually.
It is. And I'm not here saying that I think the Girl in the Bubble sequence is one of the best shot sequences of the year. It is nowhere near anything.
But compared to everything else around it, though,
it looks great compared to the slop that surrounds it. I mean, but I at least like the way the camera moves, the way the mirrors kind of shift. I think that trickery is at least pretty clever. So it's the one moment where I felt like, okay, there are some creative juices starting to present itself a little bit. And I at least appreciated that, which is something I rarely said during the entire 2+ hour runtime.
Yep, I am there with you. Moving on, there's another film that I see here on Letterboxd that you logged recently, and I'm real curious to get into this one because it does appear that we differ quite a bit. Now, I don't want to spend 25 minutes arguing over this movie because, again, we have to get to the top 5, but your thoughts on Surat, a film that has been admittedly quite polarizing anyway.
Yeah, and we don't have to spend too much time on this because I don't think it's going to be one of those cases where you actively love it and I actively hate it. I understand why it's being a divisive movie for many, and I'm right there in the middle. I was very mixed on this movie. It may have sounded like I was more cynical about it on my Letterboxd review when I called it Sorcerer Without a Soul, but
it certainly read pretty.
I know, but I admittedly I did think a good chunk of it was kind of a soulless experience for me. I was actually kind of vibing with its first half, where it was very patient and it just kind of lingered in the situation itself. There's a very particular thing that happens at the midpoint, which sort of sets it up to be a very different kind of movie. And I do have to be clear, this thing that happens, which I won't spoil, I don't mind that something like that had happened. I just don't think the movie justifies that given the people involved and how we were supposed to identify with this situation. I felt like the movie then became more interested in the shock and the provocative nature of these situations than it did what was underneath. And it could be one of those things where I just felt like these performances didn't do enough to carry that emotional weight to pull me in more so than just what those sequences were doing themselves. I think it really does come down to that. And I say that begrudgingly because I think cinematically speaking, this is a very interesting movie. It is so well shot. It's a beautiful looking movie and all on location in the Moroccan desert, if I'm not mistaken. So I really appreciate how grounded that it is, despite some of the harrowing things that do play out and how strangely fantastical it almost gets by the end. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it. I love the way it looks. I love how bold that it is. I just felt like the movie was asking me to identify with the drama underneath, and I think that was missing for me. Like, that's just the thing that I couldn't quite latch on to.
Yeah, I don't know how to articulate this because it involves, admittedly, some pretty heavy spoilers. And this is a film that has a couple of major reveals. There's two major reveals, I would say. One at the midway point, and then I guess as we get to the final act of the film, this pulsating, thrilling moment, there's an event that takes place that is quite unexpected as well.
Mm-hmm.
The one sequence at the midway point of this film, I will keep this as vague as we can, but for those that have perhaps listened to our Testament of Ann Lee conversation, that review, which is already available if you guys want to go and check that out. And I may have even brought this up last week on the show. I can't remember, but when we get to our InSession Film Awards not next week, but in a couple of weeks, and perhaps it'll show itself in our top 5 or our top 10 a little bit here as well. There is a major theme that came about in 2025.
Oh, yeah.
That is very much at play with Surratt. Let's just put it that way. This is another one of those movies where it's like, God, I need movies to relax. I need you to stop putting me in these awful positions. And admittedly, I did not see that coming, but it was, again, just one of those moments that put me on the floor. And I think part of the reason I found this so much more effective than you, I did really like this film a lot. Now, I don't think this is going to end up being one of my top 5 best international films of the year. It's not quite that high for me. It's a little outside my top 20 as it starts, or as it is right now. But I did find this to be a wild experience. And it's interesting because it starts off as this meditative examination of this father and son bonding with these rave-obsessed nomads. That opening sequence is quite something to behold. But it does quickly transform into this bleak, heart-pounding thriller, especially once we get to that moment at the midway point, as we're alluding to quite vaguely there. And I think for me, I did find myself allured to these characters. I think maybe there's just something about the premise, the idea that there's this father and son. The reason they're at this rave at the beginning of this film is because the daughter has ran away. She's disappeared. And they are looking for her. They're desperate to find her. And they believe run into these nomads that can maybe help them along that journey. And there's something about that idea that hooks me to begin with. I do find the characters compelling, and I love how the film does take its time. It is quite meditative in a lot of ways. This isn't like, despite how heart-pounding it is at times, a lot of the first half of the film, and even post the midway, that sequence at the midway point,
it does pause to reflect on a lot of things.
This is a film that's not afraid to slow down and reflect. And there's a lot of small little moments here that I very much did appreciate. I don't know if I connected to these characters as deeply as something like Sentiment of Value, for example, or One Battle After Another. Maybe not quite to that level, but I did connect to them in a way that, at the very least, invested me into their journey. So when we get to that turn at the midway point, 1, I did not see it coming, and 2, I was invested. So when it happened, it did take my breath away. And to see how one character in particular, how he reacts to it, and how he just disconnects. There's just something about that performance and that disconnect that I found kind of riveting. So, and so I did like this film a lot. I don't know how thematically dense it is, but I do think it's interesting to consider what these characters are experiencing, how they're trying to maintain any slice of humanity as this film literally turns into World War III. That's essentially what's happening here. It's the end of the world. World War III is at play. And I also just kind of love that the hook that you get at the beginning of the film essentially is a red herring. Doesn't really lead to anything, and it's actually about something else instead. So yeah, I think it's really well shot. The score is pulsating. I think there's a lot to like here from a craft perspective as well. So I did enjoy it.
And sometimes a very good sense of place that you identify with is enough to pull you in, maybe if the characters themselves are not necessarily doing the work. And that we've seen that before, right? We've seen movies where sometimes the situation is almost like the star of the movie. And I feel like Oliver Lax, who directed this, is maybe going for something like that. And like I said, I did very much vibe with a lot of that first half because it almost felt like this was some type of way for what felt like individuals who were almost acting like refugees of a sort to try to distract themselves from the ongoing reality of this so-called World War III before being pulled into the warfare itself. And in many ways, the ending of the movie almost seems to suggest the inevitability of what they're trying to avoid. I like that idea. If you want to call that a metaphorical exercise, I actually think that component of the movie is pretty effective. I wonder if maybe my experience with the movie would have been different had that singular event at the midpoint happened at a different time. I don't really know. I just don't know if it did enough underneath to really pull me in by that point. But I do think Sergio Lopez, who plays the father here, is a very compelling actor. Most people might recognize him if you see this movie, if you're a fan of Guillermo del Toro, because he was the bad guy in Pan's Labyrinth. And I had to think about that. I was like, why does he look familiar? Oh my goodness, that's Sergio Lopez. That is wild. He's getting a very different type of performance.
Very different performance, but he is excellent here. I very much do agree. And again, I think where I was compelled is the film's ability and willingness to slow down to give us these real human moments. Like there are moments where they just share food, where they just set up amps and dance to music or just talk about their lives. And I don't know, there's something about that banality amongst the idea that the world is falling apart around them. They're literally in the desert trying to escape the apocalypse happening in the world, and then to see the world crumble around them anyway. I did find that poignant, even if it is bleak, and it is pretty bleak.
It is pretty bleak, yeah, and I don't mind that idea either. And like I said, I like the idea of how mundane that it ultimately is. I guess maybe the best way I can describe this as to why I didn't connect with it as much is that this kind of felt like you were watching, at least it did for me. That's probably not the case for you. In fact, I would venture a guess that this is not at all the case for you. But this is as if, let's say you watch maybe a 10-episode season of one of your favorite shows that then got condensed to 2 hours. I felt like there was something key that was missing to really pull me in by that point, which is why I don't want to say that midpoint thing that happens is cheap, because I think there is a purpose to it. It just felt cheap for me. It just could be more of a me thing and how I failed to connect with this as much as you did and some other people did as well.
Yeah, I certainly didn't find it cheap, especially given the immediacy of what happens in the aftermath and ultimately where that leads these characters. I do think there's a ton of emotional and thematic purpose to it. Even if it is devastating, I did find it quite effective. And like I said, I did like the film quite a bit overall, even if it's not one of the best films of the year. I do think it's quite good and effective in what it's trying to do. Impossible to recommend though to anybody.
Even if I love the movie, I don't think I'd recommend it to anybody.
No. And again, I think I just appreciate it as well and how complementary it is to that overarching 2025 theme.
Sure.
I just cannot believe how many of these films we got this year. It just blows my mind.
Yeah, there are quite a few.
Blows my mind.
A few. They all involve parenthood or childhood. Sometimes they function as coming of age films in their own unique way.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
All right. I have a few others I want to talk about real fast before we do. I know there's an animated film you caught up with.
Yeah. So I'll keep this brief. There's a movie called A Magnificent Life. It is from director Sylvain Chomet, I believe I'm pronouncing his name right. This is the filmmaker behind movies like The Illusionist, but most importantly, The Triplets of Bellevue,
Which I know you're a huge
Belleville.
fan of. Yeah.
That was one of my top 5 favorite films of that year. That was 2003, I think that was. A magnificent movie. This, I don't think, is a magnificent movie, A Magnificent Life specifically. Again, this is one I'm sadly pretty mixed on. I know a lot of people have been pretty mixed on this one as well. And I have to admit something, and this is maybe where my ignorance comes into play, because Sylvain Chomet is clearly a French filmmaker, but the version of this movie that I saw was in English. And I don't know if it was originally intended to be in French or if it was always intended to be in English, but there is an awkward energy to the way that characters communicate in this movie. It really felt like I was watching a string of cutscenes from like a 90s video game that you would play on your Windows PC. It has that kind of energy to it, and it just comes to a halt and a standstill at pretty much every turn. I don't know if the language choice was a huge reason as to why it just comes at that standstill, but I found it very sterile, very emotionless, and it's capturing the life of a very fascinating individual, Marcel Pagnol, a playwright and filmmaker, and there's probably a lot you can mine from this individual. You probably could have turned this into some type of French rendition of The Wind Rises in a way. And I think there's potential there. It felt like it felt like something was clearly missing. I don't think the passion was there, especially given the passion that Sylvain Chomet maybe clearly sees for this filmmaker. And I just didn't sense that here at all.
Yeah. That is disappointing to hear. I know that, you really loved the previous movies, especially the Triplets of Bellevue. So that's disheartening to hear.
That's a great movie.
But I had heard mixed things, which is why it wasn't a priority for me in terms of my catch up. But a few that I want to briefly talk about, and then we'll get to the top 5 here. I did catch up with the horror film Shelby Oaks. This is how I spent my Christmas evening. Of course, Christmas, horror. We all associate the two there.
Says the man who always used to avoid horror.
I know. But the kids had gone to bed. The wife had passed out. So I decided to take up the opportunity to do some homework. And Shelby Oaks was one I was interested in because I've always liked Chris Stuckman as a YouTube critic and personality. I was very curious to see what he did behind the camera here with Shelby Oaks. And I guess it is just the theme of this current segment that we're in right now. Gives me no pleasure to say that it's one of the biggest disappointments of the year for me.
Dang it.
I sadly did not like this all that much. There is a lot to like from a filmmaking perspective, though. I think Stuckman shows some great promise in terms of framing and composition. It's quite effective. The atmosphere that he creates is vivid. At times, the horror elements, the jump scares, at times I do think he gets bogged down in that a little bit. But for the most part, I think from a horror perspective, from a craft perspective, there's a lot to admire. And I do think that if given better material, he could generate a genuinely really good horror film.
Okay.
However, I do think the writing here is not very good. It is riddled with cliche and obvious references that ultimately detour the back half. And that is really the biggest problem here because it does have an initial setup, this mystery that is quite intriguing. It's very, very interesting how he sets this film up. There's some archival footage, some news footage, YouTube footage of the main protagonist, her sister, who was this prominent YouTuber, and she disappears. Her and her group disappears. And there's this aura of, well, where are they? What happened to them?
Yeah.
The police are still investigating. The sister, the main protagonist, is still investigating. So there is a mystery element here that does bring you in, but the back half of the film just cannot live up to that promise. And the main culprit is because the film just gets riddled with a lot of horror, supernatural cliche, demon cliche, and trying to pander to homage.
Yeah.
And it just sadly felt so deflating to me. I at a certain point, I could not keep myself interested in the film, even as you get these what should be poignant reveals. There's a little bit of a twist that we see at the end that in a vacuum could have worked, but I don't think any of it is all that compelling because of how the writing ultimately suffocates what was an intriguing first 30 minutes. So yeah, in the end, I found myself quite disappointed with this movie.
I'm hearing that a lot, that it comes down to two things that hurt the movie. It comes down to the script, which it sounds like that's what you're saying. And it also comes down to a very specific stylistic shift that occurs maybe around the 30 or 40 minute mark. Because I do know, I think this is something that Neon was hoping to keep secret, and then they basically revealed it in the one trailer. And I do know that this movie essentially functions as a found footage movie for about 30 minutes before it then all of a sudden doesn't function as one anymore. And I hear when that point happens, the movie does suffer. That the found footage aspect was actually the most creative and interesting part of the movie. So it sounds like you're kind of in that camp as well, just given the way that the general reaction has been.
Yeah, when it's being a pastiche of Blair Witch Project, it is interesting. It is interesting. I do think that is one of the more compelling aspects to this film for sure. Again, even as obvious as the references are, I was hooked. I was with the film early on. And once we move away from that particular pastiche and we veer more into something like Rosemary's Baby, for example, it is jarring. It is quite jarring in terms of those tones, the visual differences. You know, Stuckman tries to bridge that gap a little bit, bring back some of that found footage in the back half of the film, but I don't think it's quite enough to remedy those gaps. And maybe it's just indicative of what this project is in terms of he crowdsourced a lot of the film, couldn't fully fund it. Neon had to come in to save the production of it, gave him some money. He went back to shoot a bunch of things. And as a result, it just became a mishmash of crowdsourced money, things that he shot with that particular money. And then the Neon money gave him something completely different. And then he had to try to meld it all together. And it just, was too uneven.
I did wonder that, just given how this movie came about through Kickstarter and how Neon got their hands on it to really help keep it afloat and make sure that the film got made. Because for a while, this movie was gaining a lot of traction as, I think, the highest funded indie film on Kickstarter ever. I think it broke that record. So, of course, when Neon gets their hands on it, my biggest worry was, does that mean they are then going to try to play creative force and overtake the movie?
Well, and I don't know if they do. To be fair to Neon, I don't think it's Neon getting in the way. I think it's more so he shot a big chunk of this film away from Neon with the crowdsourced money. And because his resources were limited, he had to do it in a creative, different way to make that money efficient. So when he got the Neon money, it gave him a whole new set of resources that allowed him to do more. And it just became a different approach to how he directed the film. Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense. And by that point, when he returns to the film to do either reshoots or to reshape it with this new money that Neon gave him, he may have already been pretty far removed from the movie that he had already tried making, that creatively he was just in a different headspace.
Exactly. Which makes sense as to why one half is Blair Witch and the other half is Rosemary's Baby. And
Interesting.
that's kind of what you get here.
Yeah.
So it's, and I don't know if it's because of how he was creatively feeling different or if it's because of money and how that changed his perspective. Because when you get resources, that tends to dictate where your path is going to go. And instead of using that money, but maybe muting what he could have done with the Neon money in trying to maintain the same trajectory, I think he's just like, I got X amount of dollars. I'm just going to use it all.
Yeah.
And do something different.
It does create the risk of a lack of consistency when that happens. So I get that.
So and that's a bit of conjecture. I don't know, but that's how it feels. Like when you watch this film,
Gotcha.
it's at a certain point, it's so different. And then you look at the context of how it was made, and it's like, well, at halfway through making of this film, he gets a whole bunch of more money. Well, it makes sense that half of this movie then feels like it was shot with more money.
Well,
if that makes sense.
Maybe his next project will be more consistently funded, and maybe he'll work with a more seasoned screenwriter at the same time. I know he wrote this movie, Shelby Oaks, with his wife, Sam, if I'm not mistaken. And I guess it was a passion project for them. And who knows, maybe the inconsistencies of that funding can then lead to storytelling issues, as you're talking about. So as long as there's consistency at the next project, maybe he'll, show some promise as a filmmaker.
Well, and again, that's why I go back to, let's say his next movie is $5 million and he's able to get that $5 million from the start. And that's his budget for the entire thing.
Yeah.
And it's a seamless production. Then I think he showed enough promise here that I think the next film, if that is indeed how the production goes, it will be a lot better. I have no doubt about that, for sure.
Yeah.
So disappointing, but he shows promise, for sure. Last film that I want to note here real quick is the documentary 2,000 Meters to Andreevka. This is from filmmaker, and forgive me, I'm going to butcher this name. How about Mislav Chernov? Mislav Chernov. That's my.
It sounds
my
like a
best.
name to
I'm
me.
Sorry. This is the same filmmaker that did 20 Days in Mariupol in 2024, 23.
I think that was 23.
I'm trying to recall. Was that last year or 23? Either way, I don't know if you got a chance to see that documentary, Mariupol. I can't remember.
I think I did actually see that one.
Anyway, that documentary, devastating, extremely bleak, obviously showcasing the carnage and the bloodshed of the initial attack in Ukraine, in Mariupol, it turns out, more specifically. So he is back once again, this time continuing the war in Ukraine. And this is about Ukrainian soldiers. Essentially, what they're doing is, at least based off of what he is telling us here, the war feels a lot like Vietnam in the sense that Vietnam wasn't fought conventionally. In Vietnam, they just had battles and they were fighting for land, or not land. They were just fighting battles, fighting to kill each other. And whoever won in a conventional war, you take that land and you use that to your advantage. In Vietnam, everyone just went home. They went back to home base. It wasn't about capturing land. It was about just kind of killing the other side. There's a little bit of that going on here in the sense that these Ukrainian soldiers, it's this counter offensive where they are trying to capture villages that were taken, but they just don't have the resources to maintain that land. So there's just a bunch of battles for all of these little villages, and it's almost for morale's sake to be able to plant a flag to be like, we took this village back. even though we won't be able to stay here for very long.
Mhm.
It's a little bit of that is what's going on, but it's all on the front lines. So
Yeah.
all the footage, it's a little bit like The Perfect Neighbor, and where all of that is shot through police body cam. This is all shot through soldiers wearing cameras on their helmets,
Okay.
or the
Okay.
filmmakers themselves, Chernoff here and his crew, with handheld cameras on the front lines.
Gotcha.
We
Okay.
we literally see these battles take place up close and personal, extremely intimate, and it is
Wow.
fascinating. Yeah,
Wow. That sounds depressing, but it
it
sounds
is
necessary.
absolutely. Yeah, no, it is bleak. It is devastating. It's quite extraordinary. And what's also great is that while we see a lot of the battle that is happening for the village of Andreevka,
Mhm.
at the same time, there's a lot of like he's not afraid to slow down and just capture these interactions with soldiers that are there on the front line and just linger in their humanity, because you never know, these soldiers, they might not make it to the war, and he is aware of this. So he just captures these moments where they just talk with them when the battle is in these moments of quiet stillness. He just has these conversations with these soldiers, and we just get to know them, and the camera just lingers on them, just doesn't move away from them. And like that's honestly some of the most fascinating, where you just get these guys and their raw humanity, trying to cope with literally killing
This-
death around them.
Wow. Like what you just said there sounds just as much as a ringing endorsement as it does a non-endorsement, just
Yeah.
given the bleakness, at least for certain people. And that's why I jokingly said that is bleak, but also it sounds necessary, just given the realism of
very
that.
very much
Yeah.
so. Yeah, I mean, to capture the spirit of what Ukrainian is trying to do in terms of maintaining the fight and
Mhm.
and that spirit of hope and fight,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it also seems like a lost cause, and
It's like they know
it
it.
is heartbreaking. Yeah, no, it's devastating for sure.
Okay.
So yeah, it's one of those hard to recommend, hard to stomach in a lot of ways. It's not quite as bloody as Mariupol is,
Mhm.
but it's still devastating to watch, but necessary and vital at the same, like in terms of like from a journalistic perspective. I think what he's doing is quite important.
We always get one or two documentaries like that each year that fall into almost like this category of political warfare that feels so necessary yet so bleak they're hard to recommend. I kind of feel like something like No Other Land was that movie last year, in its own way. Maybe not, doesn't quite have the same maybe level of bleakness as you're describing, at least viscerally speaking. But I think that the topicality of it is certainly there. It would certainly be hard to recommend for certain individuals.
Yeah, but good. It's very, very good. Certainly
Okay.
one of the better docs of the year. I can very much vouch for that. Before we get to the top 5, just a bit of a lighter note, because I also I wanted to bring up The Plague here. I wasn't a big fan of that film. I don't know if I really want to go into it all that much.
Okay.
I will say though, with The Plague, I think this is a film that comes out very soon if it's not out already. And it stars a bunch of kids. It's about this youthful water polo team, but it's really a movie about bullying. Joel Edgerton is in the film in a supporting role. I don't like it's one of those movies where I think I could have been won over if it stuck the landing, but I think it very much drowns in the pool, so to speak. I think it's terrible.
Nice symbolism.
Like the ending of the film, I think, is really bad, and so I didn't love that movie.
Please tell me it ends like Let the Right One In.
No.
Okay. I love that you had to think about that to see what I was talking about.
Yeah, no. I will say though, K.O. Martin is the real star of that film. He is by far the best thing about it. And it's not a spoiler to say he is the main bully. He plays bad guy. So good. If they ever remake Mean Girls into Mean Boys, it better star him because he is phenomenal.
So instead of Regina George, it'll be Roger George or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. He should be the titular mean boy because he is just you hate him. You hate him so much here, but he plays that so good. It's
hard to get that
really
right.
Great.
Yeah, it's hard to get that right.
Yeah.
We often see many movies that portray bullies, and they often feel either too over the top or too glossy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It sounds like this one actually captures the realism of what a child bully could be, which is, I don't know.
I didn't like the film all that much, but I mean this genuinely. One of the best villain performances of the decade so far.
Wow.
Genuinely. I mean,
okay.
He's that effective in that role. I wish I liked the film more, but sadly I didn't. Anyway, I'm mostly wanted to say here on a lighter note before we get to the top 5, the Baltimoreans, really charming, really fun.
And it's so sweet.
It's so sweet. So good. I very much recommend that movie. Some of it's very awkward. Comedy is hard for me to stomach, just subjectively speaking.
I know that's not quite your thing. It's more my thing, but yeah.
But I was charmed by it. I was very, very endeared by it.
It's a good romance.
You were right. Yeah. Brendan, coffee is a must. We need it. We survive on it.
Just the thought of it just feels like therapy.
Oh, I know. Like that first sip in the morning is heaven. It is blissful. It is one of the best moments of the day.
It's the best alarm clock. It really is.
It is great. And look, if you're going to drink coffee, you might as well drink good coffee. Why do you want the bad coffee that sits on shelves for a while and it's stale and it's
loaded with preservatives?
Yeah, and it's undrinkable unless you put a bunch of crap in it.
Oh, yeah.
That's why we love Coffee Cult, because you don't need a bunch of stuff in this coffee. It is
great as it is.
Premium, gourmet, specialty grade coffee. It is literally some of the best coffee on the planet. And depending on what you get, you could get a coffee that is pungent with fruity notes, like the Harar that tastes like a blueberry muffin.
Yeah.
It is incredible. Or you can get something like the Sumatra, which is heavy and dark chocolate and caramel and oat.
That's my favorite.
Also really, really good. Yeah. I mean, it's all fantastic. You don't need to put a lot of stuff in this coffee. If you want to splash your milk, that's fine. But it is
coffee is not caffeinated milk. Coffee is not caffeinated milk.
Exactly.
It's great as it is. And Coffee Cult is doing great things by also ethically sourcing where they get their beans, also choosing to work with farms that are very ethically worked as well. They also pay their farmers and workers very equally, women especially. So they're very adamant in doing their research to work with the right people.
Exactly. So they're doing it the right way. The coffee is great. I mean, there's just no reason to give them a go. So if you're a coffee drinker like we are, you have to check them out. Coffeecult.com. That's coffee with a K, cult with a K. Coffeecult.com. At checkout, use our code ISF25 and you'll get 15% off. I will say though, on that promo code, we are recording this in the last days of December.
Yes.
So that code ISF25 is as good as 2025 goes. As soon as we veer into 2026, guess what? That code is going to be ISF26. So if you're listening to this in 2026 after the new year, use the code ISF26. Either way, you will get 15% off your order. And it's great. So go check them out. Again, that's coffeecall.com. And we thank them for their support. All right, Brendan, let's talk about t-shirts and swag and all that fun stuff. If you want to support the show, that is one of the best ways to support us. You can always become a VIP. Check us out at Patreon, patreon.com/InSessionFilm, or you can buy an InSession Film t-shirt, and that's a great way to help us out as well. And we have a bunch of fun designs. We have a brand new design that I am excited to share with the world. It's one that I've been festering with for some time. And if you want to see it, I mean, I'll probably put up a photo here if you're watching on YouTube. But if you're listening to the show, go to InSessionFilm.dashery.com. It's also on TeePublic as well. If you go to TeePublic, search InSession Film, you'll find our store there. We have a brand new 28 years later shirt.
It's so good.
I cannot wait to get this. This is going to be the next one I get. This is our 28 years later Memento Mori shirt. If you're a fan of that film like we are, you're going to want to check this out. Had a lot of fun putting this one together. I really enjoyed it. I hope other people like it. You can go and check that out. I'm also working on One Battle After Another shirt and maybe some others as well. You know, time is a slippery slope. It gets away from me a lot, but we are working on coming up with more designs for this year, especially. We do have a Sinners shirt that I really like a lot.
I think it's one of our best. I think it's one of your best, man.
Yeah, appreciate it. So there's a Sinners shirt out there. I'm currently wearing I could use a Boost shirt.
I was just going to say, I thought you were. Yeah. So for those watching on YouTube, you have a great visual as to some of this great design work that JD's doing.
So yeah, really do appreciate it. You can go and check all that out. We have a Film Score Junkie shirt. I wear that one all the time as well.
Well, you probably wear that to work every day.
I wish I could. Wear it every day. I do wear it a lot though. Yeah, there's all kinds of fun things on there. So if you have an idea, let us know. I would love to put something together if you have an idea. Very much get a hold of us. But with all that said, InSessionFilm.dashery.com, InSessionFilm.com/store as well. You can see all of our designs there. And all of that helps keep this going each and every week. So we really do appreciate those that are checking that out. Again, InSessionFilm.dashery.com. And we thank you for your support. Okay, with that said, let's go ahead and transition to our top 10 scenes of 2025. It is that time. We are close to the InSession Film Awards. As we noted up at the top of this, one of our favorite conversations that we have each and every year. This time we are breaking this into two parts, as I noted up at the top as well. This will be our 10 through 6 picks. We'll do the top 5 next week on the show. Did you have any criteria? We normally don't have too much criteria here.
Normally we don't. I feel like I sort of have a little bit of criteria every single time. It's just not the hardest of criteria as it is for other top 5s that we do for other shows. But I will say, I am trying my best not to pick only final scenes from movies, because this really could be our top 10.
Like of all
scene.
The years, especially, this is a year where you could do that. Like of all the years.
And that's really the point I'm trying to make. So there are a few here where I am picking the final scene from a specific movie, and that's only because I had no other choice not to.
That's I see what you're doing there. There's a little teaser there. I see.
Teaser. We just reviewed that movie, so go and listen to that one. I need to give that one a revisit. So sadly, that one might not pop up in my top 10. But for the most part, I am trying to only pick final scenes from movies if that was really my only option and it made the most sense to do that. And I'm also relegating this to 10 individual movies, that so not just 10 scenes, but also one scene per movie, if that makes sense, which we normally do. There are at least a few movies here where I probably could pick at least 2 or 3 scenes that would be eligible to be among my favorite scenes of the year in a solid top 10, but I want to spread that wealth like I always try to do. So that's my only other criteria here.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you in the sense that I found a lot of ending scenes that could have and probably should make this list. It truly was a legendary year as far as endings go, closing scenes, just all-time year from that perspective. I do have a few here for sure that we'll get to either this week or next week. Really my only criteria though for this list, as it always is, as you just pointed out, I limited myself one film per pick. I did not pick
Yeah.
2 scenes from a single film.
Yeah.
So I have 10 different movies that I will highlight here. And that tends to be the biggest criteria.
We tend to do that all the time. We do that every
Yeah.
time, and I think that's
So I
best.
didn't-
We see so many movies. Let's spread the wealth.
Exactly. Okay. With that said, let's jump into this. Our top 10 scenes of the year. Number 10, Brendan, what do you got?
So the one I have as my number 10, I have it as my number 10 primarily because it's kind of a scene, but I'm mostly picking it at my number 10 because of a very particular shot. If anything, it might be my favorite shot of the year. And because of how much it affected me, it might actually be higher on this list, but the limited nature of it is why I only have it at number 10. For my number 10, I'm going to go with The Secret Agent. And I'm actually going to go with the split diopter shot that takes place at the record scene when this one hitman is after Marcelo, and he has to essentially play dumb when he hears his name being called, that no, I am not this individual. This is right around the point where the film is beginning to briefly transition into the type of political thriller you might have expected it to be. But I do think that this setup, the way it introduces that genre, is still very unconventional because it introduces it in a way that's very antithetical to what we normally see as violence in a crime movie, right?
Sure.
Instead, it is communicated to us through words, through the calling out of one's name, the anticipation of a gun being drawn, only for it to then be put right back. And I think the silence of it made it, I want to call it one of the most thrilling sequences of the entire year. But I think the best way I can describe it is that it was probably the moment of any film from this year where it actually did take my breath away. That is something I rarely say because I feel like you could say that a lot about certain things that you like in movies that it quote unquote took your breath away. But this one literally quite did. I was glued to the screen when that moment happened and I couldn't breathe. I was stressed out of my mind in a way that the movie is clearly asking you to feel. And I thought the filmmaking there was just so exquisite that I couldn't leave just this simple shot off this list. But I think the scene itself, the entire record scene that it's confined within, is still very effective. The cinematographer here, I want to highlight his name, even though I know I'm not going to be able to pronounce it. It's Evgenia Alexandrova. I probably butchered that so badly. I think we tried to say his name during the actual review of this movie, and we butchered it there as well. But credit where credit is due, because the way that shot is formulated to highlight the quietness of that tension, I think is just so exquisite. And I wanted to talk about that here.
Man, if we're gonna do our favorite shots of the year, I'm gonna need at least a top 50. At least a top 50 if we're doing best shots of the year. And I do agree, this is a great sequence. Then that is a great shot and great use of the camera. I love this film as well. I don't know if I have anything else to add. I think you articulated it perfectly, why it's so thrilling and incredible for that moment. Wagner Moura is extraordinary in his performance. And I do love how the film captures that moment of being found out.
Yeah.
That
and you could tell, sorry to cut you off, but you could tell, and this is what makes Wagner Moura's performance so great. He is desperately trying not to react. And you could sense he is trying to hide it. And that's a hard thing to do.
And maybe failing.
Yeah.
Failing.
But there are very minor subtleties in the way that he doesn't react that almost look like it could have been a giveaway. That's brilliant acting right there.
It's perfect. It's absolutely incredible because you do see Marcelo crumble in the moment a little bit and struggle with what to do next. How am I going to get out of this situation? And of course, given where the film goes, there is a tragic irony to it all. But I do think a lot of what we see at the end of the film, the coda, it begins with this moment, and it is quite thrilling. Really good stuff.
This is basically the moment that kicks off the entire final sequence that then leads to what makes it one of the best endings of the year. I could have talked about the ending as one of the best scenes of the year, but I have so many other endings I want to get to. I needed something else to add some variety here.
Yeah. No, I agree. That is a great moment, and I do love the ending to this film as well. Both of those are great honorable mentions for me. All right, my number 10, this was a little bit of a last-minute shift. I actually had a different scene here in place until earlier this evening as we are recording this because something came to mind. Circling back to what I said about our conversation of The Testament of Anne Lee. At the beginning of my opening thoughts for that film, I talked about how there is this prominent theme for 2025. And we alluded to this when talking about Surratt as well. This year has been riddled with movies about grief and motherhood and fatherhood. Not just Surratt, but of course, Hamnet, Die My Love, The Chronology of Water, If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, 28 Years Later, Train Dreams. All those films deal with childhood grief, parenthood, the challenges of parenthood, trauma as it relates to parenthood and childhood, some version of that. Of course, The Testament of Anne Lee is a big part of that conversation as well. And we went into all those various reasons in that review. However, in that conversation, aside from Surratt, which came to mind as we talked about that earlier, there was one other movie that I forgot to add to the list. And I think the reason it didn't come to mind immediately is because I'm not quite as high on the movie overall as I am those aforementioned movies.
Yeah, I get you.
There's one movie that came to mind, but this is the best part of it, at least for me. Now, given what the social media discourse is, a lot of people will very adamantly disagree with me on this, and that is perfectly fine. But for me, this is the best part of the film.
Oh, no.
I am, of course, talking about Avatar Fire and Ash.
Okay.
I am talking about Neytiri. That's who I'm talking about. Now, obviously, so much of her arc in that film is grieving the death of her son, as we saw in The Way of Water. Same with Jake Sully as well. So throughout a lot of that film, she is cold, emotionless, distant. There's also that great moment, good honorable mention for me here as well, when she even admits and hates that she has to admit this, that even her own kids sometimes remind me of why she doesn't like humans. And she has to grapple with this. And I just find that trajectory in the film incredible, that her grief had gone so far as to maybe put a gap between her and the rest of her kids. Now, as the film goes, it does a great job of removing that gap a little bit. And we do see that obviously she still loves her kids and she loves Jake. And, but that is a big through line in the film. And the reason she comes around is because my boy, Jake Sully, played by the great Sam Worthington. And I love that I get to say that phrase now.
This man's going to win an Oscar soon. I know it.
Have come around on Sam Worthington so much. Every time that name gets brought up on social media, I get giddy. I get excited. I get emotional. I have really come to love him a lot as this character. And he goes full Genesis 22 in this film. And that is my number 10 pick here. When he goes full Abraham in this film, I find it incredible. And I think what's great about this sequence is that there's a bit of an old school filmmaking approach to it, despite the fact that it takes place in this fictional world of Pandora, where James Cameron has spent his entire life building specific technology to bring it to life. And over the course of the last few years with The Way of Water, now Fire and Ash, a visual masterpiece. Stunning, immersive experience from a visual perspective. But what I love about Goat Cameron is that from a storytelling perspective, he's actually quite old school. He is never going to win an Oscar for screenwriting.
He's never going to get nominated for a writing Oscar.
Never.
I mean, look at how successful Titanic was as an Oscar winner, and that movie wasn't even nominated for best screenplay.
No, his movies are not made to win Oscars from a writing perspective. He keeps things fairly, I don't want to say simple, but he's not afraid to live in the world of convention. He loves it. He embraces it. There are certain tropes that he just clings to that are actually strengths because of how they lean into the spectacle, how they lean into emotion.
He likes the familiar, and his goal is to make that familiar look new.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And feel new, even though they're not. And that's what I love about The Way of Water. When you break down The Way of Water from a writing, plotting perspective, like that's not why that film is great.
Although I will say it actually is maybe one of the strongest scripts to a James Cameron movie.
Oh, and I agree with that. And like, I'm not trying to downplay the writing because I actually love the writing. But again, I'm not nominating that screenplay for an Oscar.
Fair.
You know, like there's a lot of tropiness to it. There's a lot of conventionality to it. But again, it's how he uses that to his advantage to tell a thrilling story, to tell an emotional story. And he does take a few risks that perhaps subvert convention and traditionalism in that film. And again, that's why he's Goat Cameron. What I love about this moment with Jake, and the reason I say all of that is because we know that nothing's going to happen to Spider. We know that.
Yeah.
The overall story, where we know where all of this is going, Spider is going to be a big part of this series moving forward. He has already planted the seeds. Everything that we see between Spider and Quaritch, and of course everything we see with the Sully family, he's not going to die in this film. We know that, but despite that, there's still that old school filmmaking trick of making you forget that for a moment because the emotion and what it means for these characters is so strong that it still has this heart-pounding thrill to it. And we have seen Goat Cameron, to be fair to him, he has shown throughout the previous two movies that he's not afraid to kill characters. And he uses that to his advantage here. Yeah. Even though we probably know nothing's going to happen to Spider, we have seen major characters die.
It doesn't make, you might not be 100% sure.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
might, maybe more like
98% sure. But there's still that small sliver of doubt that maybe, but probably not.
Maybe something's about to happen.
But he uses that to his advantage. And Jake having that great moment with Spider, where Spider realizes that, okay, this has to happen. He just accepts that this is his fate. Jake brings the knife back. And again, I just love that old school filmmaking approach. I do think it's really, really effective in this moment, especially because what he's doing there is he's going full Abraham. He is having to test Neytiri. And the only way to do that is to make it look real, that I'm going to have to kill him.
Yeah.
And if she doesn't stop me, well, then I guess this is the end of Spider. Just like with Abraham. Abraham was going to kill his son. The knife had been drawn.
Yeah.
And he's about to come down, and that's when God goes, okay, you were going to do it. I believe you. That's the end of this. And that is verbatim what happens here. And then when Neytiri realizes what is about to take place and her compassion, her motherhood instincts kick in, and she goes back into the woods. And I deeply love that moment. I love what it means for Jake. I love what it means for Neytiri and her grief, because there is a pivot point. She does change throughout the rest of this film as a result of that moment. And I deeply love it. to me, it's easily the best scene in that film. And again, I know people will yell and scream at me because
No, that's a
Varang
good
is in
scene.
this film, but
Yeah, that's a really good scene. It's
Yeah,
the scene
to me,
that
that's it.
reminds me. Yeah, it's the scene that reminds me the most of why The Way of Water works so well. 'Cause
exactly.
It shares a lot
Yeah.
of the complexities of that movie.
Exactly. And I think because I love that film so much, and I love Jake and I love Natiri and I love those performances, those were the characters I was still the most drawn to here. And that's not to like Quaritch, badass, love him. Stephen Lang, he's incredible. I love him in these films as well. And Una Chaplin is really great as Varang. I love her as well. I think that's a great introduction for that character. I don't know if I'm overly horny for her as everyone else.
Well, the
seems to
character's
be.
incomplete. Yeah, it's an
Yes.
underwritten character at this point.
It's underwritten character, but yes, she also has that badass vibe to her.
Yeah.
A lot to like about the film in that regard. But for me, especially when we're talking about James Cameron peak emotional filmmaking, which is where he thrives, that's the Genesis 22 scene in this film. That's when this film is at its best, I think.
I didn't see this coming for your top 10, but I knew how much you liked this scene, so I guess I shouldn't be that surprised. And it is the best scene in the movie.
Yeah.
And just continue. Oh,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry,
go ahead.
sorry to cut you off, but not only do I love it on its own terms in a vacuum, I think ultimately it lands on this list for me at number 10 because of the 2025 thematic undercurrent of it all as well. A mother grieving over the loss of a child and how that affects every decision that she makes here. I don't know why we saw that so much in this calendar year,
either.
but
Who was running Hollywood this year?
God, they got look. Cameron can keep it going. That's fine because he's got Cameron. But generally, I need everyone else to stop. 2026 better be about gummy bears and unicorns and rainbows. Okay.
And Steven Spielberg making another Alien movie.
Yeah, and Spielberg
and
making
Spielberg
an
aliens.
alien.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, at any rate, all joking.
It's a
aside,
very good scene.
I do
Yeah,
love
it's a
this
great scene.
a lot.
Yeah. In a film I don't love that much, but I do love this scene.
Mm-hmm.
But
All right,
but
that
I
is
do
my
think,
number 10.
I will say that will keep to the theme with at least maybe one or two of the films on my list. I won't say what they are yet, but sometimes you have to look past what just your favorite movies of the year are to pick your favorite scenes, because sometimes there might be at least one movie that you know is not going to crack your top 20 that may have a particular scene that still ranks as one of the best scenes of the year. So I assume Avatar Fire and Ash is not going to be among maybe even your top 30 of the year. But the fact that you at least still chose to highlight a scene from it because the scene itself is that good, I think that's respectful. And I think that showcases that, we're willing to look beyond just what the best of the year are.
Yeah. And the scene that I had at number 10 earlier today before I replaced it, also not in my top 30. And maybe I can reveal that at the end here. We'll do more honorable mentions on the next show, but maybe I'll reveal
Yeah, we could save that for later.
that one here at the end. But yeah, I mean, sometimes you get really great scenes in films that aren't among your top best.
Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, number 9. What do you got at number 9?
Number 9, I think I'll spend very little time on this one for a few reasons. I feel like this scene is maybe the universal favorite among many critics as the best scene of the year, and I have a hunch you're going to talk about it at some point, whether it be today or on the next part 2 episode for scenes of the year. But I'm going to go with the one take sequence from Sinners for my number 9.
Okay.
Yeah. The song I Lied to You, performed by
Yeah.
Miles Catton, who in that scene is playing the great Sammy Moore. As a musician, as someone that truly appreciates the evolution, the musical evolution and influence of music, I love the way that this sequence represents that. This is why I think I would argue that of all things, Sinners is primarily a movie about blues music and the influence of blues music. I think it is primarily that. And when you see it as that, I think as a historical piece about that and how the whole vampire stuff is acting more as a metaphor for the relationship people had to that music at the time, I think it's a more effective movie because of it. And this scene showcases the power of that particular music in a sequence that is just simply beautifully shot. Cinematographer Autumn Durand Archipel, I believe her name is. Just the staging of it is quite impeccable. And Ryan Coogler is someone that has a bit of a trademark in all of his movies. You notice that each one of his directorial efforts has at least one pivotal one-take sequence, right? They all have it in some way. Black Panther had it. Creed had it. This movie now has it. This is probably his most emotionally captivating one, at least it is for me, given the musicality that I thrive in and the music that I love to play. So for all of those reasons, just the overarching influence and history that's represented on screen in a sequence that is probably like 4 or 5 minutes long. It's honestly insane how they pulled this off. So yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about this one more, but I do think it's one of the best scenes of the year.
Yeah, it is fantastic. Certainly one of the scenes of the year.
Yeah,
I agree. Good stuff.
Cheers.
My number 9, I'm going to a filmmaker that I deeply love. I'm going to a film that I deeply love. It is Jafar Panahi's It Was Just an Accident. And maybe I could go with that final shot, but this is maybe me shoehorning in. It's not quite the end. It's close to the end though.
But it's kind of the thing that makes the end so powerful, right?
Exactly. And it's the scene prior to that final shot, which is so incredible. But I am going with what I'll dub confronting the abuser scene that takes place there at night with Vahid and Shiva. I will also say this. I probably should have said this up front, and this it applies to next week as well. Because we are talking about our best scenes of the year, and many of them take place at the midway point or later in those films, we are going to be talking about spoilers for a lot of these scenes. So just
that
a
is
fair
a great
warning.
point. How did we not say that earlier? That's
I don't know.
Huge,
I typically
that's a huge miss on us.
I typically do lay that out up front. I, for some reason, missed that. But yes,
I forgot to say it too. We're both at fault there, man.
Spoiler alert for the rest of this conversation and also for the top 5 next week as well. And this takes place right before we get to the final scene. So again, spoilers here for It Was Just an Accident. But I love this film because in a lot of ways, it is the movie of the year. And it's certainly the movie for Jafar Panahi. If you know anything about his career, he's been arrested several different times. He was banned from making movies for a decade or so. And while that didn't stop him, it clearly was something that has been bubbling with him for quite some time. And here is a movie where these characters, who we come to find out were tortured when they were in prison, which he is familiar with, and the oppression that they experienced, they find the person that is the culprit for their torture. They find him, and they have a choice to make. Do we kill him? Do we bury him in the desert? Do we get our vengeance? What do we do with this guy? That is at the core of this film. And eventually it gets to a moment where they take him outside. It is at night in the desert, and Vahid and Shiva, they do confront him, and they pose these questions. They try to get some clarity on it. And you can just feel the catharsis pouring out of Jafar Panahi in this moment. As far as his own career, the persecution that he has experienced. And I think what's also funny is that he's in the United States right now doing a lot of media for this film, and it's likely going to end up Oscar nominated. So he's going to go to LA and he's going to be at the Oscars. And I am so excited for him, regardless of whether he wins or not. But the irony is, and he's already stated that once all of that is done, he's going back to Iran knowing that he's going to be arrested again.
Yeah.
Going to be put back into prison again.
What a brave man. What a brave man.
Very, very much so. And with this film, he's wrestling with those moral convictions. What it would be like to face those that are persecuting you, how do you react in that moment? And with Vahid and Shiva, you can see them struggling. And I think what's fascinating about the moment is the ambiguity of it, because they do kidnap a man. That is very objective of the moment. And there is some physical abuse, and there's a lot of yelling and a lot of purging of their emotions. But what I love about the film is that the two characters ultimately, they don't indulge in violence. They don't reciprocate it, even though there was violence put onto them when they were in prison. And I just love that Panahi is exploring that middle ground.
Sure.
The idea that moral convictions are not black and white. It might look that way on paper, but in practice, it's much more real and nuanced. And that is ultimately what is happening there in that moment. And it is deeply emotional to watch.
Yeah.
And I just love the personal catharsis it is for Jafar Panahi, a filmmaker that I have followed for a long time, that I love. I've seen most, if not all, of his movies. He's certainly one of my guys. And to see him have the success he's had this year with a film that is his most personal to this date is just something that I cannot get over. And this moment in the desert is certainly quintessential of what makes him such a rich filmmaker.
Yeah. What I love about this scene too is that, and I think we talked about this when we reviewed the movie, I am so glad that Jafar Panahi made it when he did, and he didn't make it too early when maybe some of these more vengeful thoughts were fresher on his mind. This is kind of similar to someone like Martin Scorsese waiting the right time to make a movie like Silence, right? And I think we made that comparison when we reviewed it was just an accident, if I'm not mistaken. And I think the scene is so crucial and important because it relishes in that gray area that achieving such acts of violence as vengeance doesn't really get you anywhere. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's a brief form of catharsis. And I'm glad that Panahi made the movie when he did to add some nuance to that conversation. Admittedly, the final scene, that final shot, and that sound effect that you hear was probably my number 11 on this list. But I think you're right in that scene mostly works, if not only works, because of this moment that you're talking about. They're all connected. So in many ways, the final 20 minutes or so kind of acts as my number 11 for this entire exercise.
And I love the parallels to what's happening here in the United States too. There's such a big difference between moral conviction on paper and how that manifests in the real world. And we saw that this year. Not to get too political, I don't want to get bogged down in U.S. politics here, but when you look at something like the Charlie Cook assassination, for example, that happens because of emotion and vengeance taking over. Instead of letting that marinate over years and years and years. And what Jafar Panahi is doing here, like you said, he's making this at the right time, because in his earlier days, this might have been more vengeful. It might have been more violent. He might not have reacted with the same level of nuance that we see at the end of this film. And maybe it says something about maturity. Maybe it just says something about how he personally has wrestled with this over time. I'm sure it's different from person to person, but it certainly says something about why we see these acts of violence in our lives all the time. And certainly not just here in the United States, but all over the world.
Absolutely.
And
it's universal, very universal.
It's very universal, but certainly it's close to home given what we've seen this year as well. And I just find all of that fascinating here. So yeah,
absolutely. I agree.
9. All right. Number 8. What do you got at number 8?
Number 8. So for a little bit of context, once again, for my number 9, I had Sinners, and that was the one-take sequence from Sinners. I'm going from one take sequence to another one take sequence. Now for my number 8, I'm going to the film Sentimental Value from Joachim Trier.
Nice.
This is one of the final scenes of a movie that I'm going to be talking about. This is the final one take sequence, the film that Gustav Borg is ultimately directing, and JD's raising his hand for those who are watching on YouTube, which means that JD and I have some crossover here.
This is also my number 8.
Perfect. Let's talk about it together, man.
I love when this happens, and it happens way more often than it should.
I mean, we often have a lot of crossover, but I love when it's the same placement.
The same
on our
number,
list.
yeah.
That just it allows us to save time. I love that.
It really does. It's so funny how this happens from time to time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I'll get things started, and you can springboard off of what I'm about to say here. I first off, I love when a movie like this comes around that features a one-take sequence, and it's not flashy for the sake of just having a one-take sequence. In a way, this is a movie that's about, or at least this scene is about, telegraphing a one-take sequence more so than actually executing it. Because earlier in the film, we get a very clear monologue that the film that Gustav Borg, played by Stellan Skarsgård, is making will have a one-take sequence in it, and he describes it verbatim to the Rachel Kemp character played by Elle Fanning. So we as the audience know what to expect when he is about to shoot that scene. So when he does at the end, and then we notice where it slightly deviates from his original plan, that's what makes it so powerful. And the fact that this performance, this character that he is shooting for his movie, is no longer being played by Rachel Kemp. It's being played by his daughter, Nora Berg, played by Renata Reinsve. And the reasons for that and why it adds new context to how he chooses to change the narrative of what he's shooting. I love that this is a movie that's not utilizing the one-take sequence as a mere tactic just to say, I'm a director and look what I can do. It actually has an almost deconstructionistic personality to it. And the way that Nora and her father, Gustav, share glances at each other, that then reflects this idea of how some people can only communicate with your family based on shared interests in art specifically. And that's really what you have. I think that's very powerful. I really do. I think that's quite beautiful with how this movie examines that in a way that is technical, but in a way that's also calling attention as to why it's technical. So I love a sequence like this that can do that. So that's why I love it. Let's hear why you love it.
I mean, I'm right there with you. I think Sentimental Value is a masterclass in storytelling, and what we see in this film is Gustav wanting to essentially create his Fabelmans. That's how I described it when we reviewed it here on the show. He's wanting to make this film that is close to him and his upbringing as a means of healing. And as the film unfolds, we do come to see much about his childhood and how that has informed a lot of his emotional baggage, which then reinforces the volatility in his daughters, in Nora and Agnes.
Yeah.
And it leads to this catharsis, again, through art that we see at the end of the film when he begins to make his movie, and in particular, recreate that one-take sequence as you just noted. And because it's so personal, it was something that was always meant for Nora to do.
Yeah.
Of course, throughout the film, she didn't want to do it. He had to talk to another actress, enter Elle Fanning into the film, and everything that we see there, which is great on its own. But it could only be played by one actress. And he knew that. Gustav knew that. And I do love how at the end of this film, we do get the one take shot as you're talking about. And you hear him yell cunt, and the two, Nora and Gustav, they do communicate in that final moment without ever opening their mouths.
It's unspoken reconciliation.
And it's astonishing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely incredible how they're able to express that reconciliation through art. It is beautiful. It's exactly what makes art and film so provocative and moving to me. It's what makes it so profound and emotionally stirring. And I think it's great. And especially when you couple it with Agnes's son also being involved in that sequence. Because for Agnes, so much of her pushback with her father stems from the fact that she was actually a child star in one of his movies when he was younger.
Right.
And it was the best time of her life. That's one of the best scenes of this film as well. A great honorable mention when she's talking about how she loved it. But then he left, and it left her broken. Mm-hmm. And so the two of them, the two daughters here, Nora and Agnes, in different ways, they have a strained relationship with Gustav. And it all comes back to art and film in this fascinating way. So the fact that all of them together, even though Agnes isn't on camera herself, but her son is, and he's young, he's a child actor here, much like she was for him as well. So it comes full circle in that regard. And it's why I thought a lot of, weirdly, I know this is a weird comparison, but I thought a lot about Warrior with this movie, given how you have this father figure bringing two siblings together. And that is exactly what's happening here. You have this father figure bringing two siblings together in ways that they wouldn't have without him pursuing this project. Mm-hmm. And it just becomes quintessential art as a healer. And I just deeply, deeply love it. It's so fascinating. And again, I love the performative stillness of it. That shot of Gustav and Nora simply acknowledging each other without ever saying anything, like it really did a number on me. And it's why I tend to gravitate toward subtlety more than the bombastic moments. I love a good loud moment as well, but generally I feel like there's more power in subtlety, and this is very much that.
Because the lack of immediacy of it allows you to find some new nuances each time you revisit it. And I did try to watch this scene again, and while I knew what I was getting into and I got what I was expecting, I also still sensed a few new things about it. The fact that it wasn't as obvious and literal, I think, is why there's so much to mine from that simple gesture. And I love when performances and movies can tap into that specific thing. So great movie. Absolutely great movie. Joachim Trier, really good at his job.
Good stuff. Yeah. So my number 8 as well, it turns out. That's really funny. All right. Okay. So on to number 7. What do you got? Number 7?
My number 7 is probably one of the films from this year that I did really love, that I also don't have any interest in watching again. But this particular scene, I am not going to forget anytime soon. And this is from Mary Bronstein's "If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You." One of the most uncomfortable experiences of the year. But weirdly, the one scene from the movie that just keeps standing out for me is also maybe the funniest scene of the movie simultaneously. That's the hamster scene.
Okay.
And the reason why, first off, the reason why is because I just can't say I've ever seen anything like this. And when a movie can have me saying that, that means it is doing something very right. At least just the sheer execution of how this particular scene captures anxiety and nerves, and someone just at the end of their rope, given what her circumstances are.
Yeah.
I think this particular moment maybe captures that idea maybe most effectively in a film that is all about that specific thing. And the whole film is doing that very well too. But why this scene worked for me so well, it's weirdly the one shot of when the hamster gets loose in that fender bender that she gets in.
Yeah.
And runs into traffic and clearly gets run over and demolished. And it's a pretty bloody and graphic scene.
Yeah.
There's a brief moment where you can clearly tell that is a fake animatronic hamster, right?
Yeah.
Like Mary Bronstein is not hiding that.
Yeah.
And
I think she said it was a puppet.
But even so, like you can tell it's not real.
Yeah.
And
for sure. Yeah.
But it adds a sense of humor to the scene. But the more I thought about it, and I don't know if this was intentional, I would have to listen to maybe a few more interviews from Bronstein to hear what she has to say about this particular scene and the movie at large. But it also plays into something that we talked about a lot during our review of the movie, and that's kind of this distortion of reality from Rose Byrne's perspective, the character she plays of Linda. I was blanking on her name for a second. And I talked about how there's an argument to be made that she actually is quite the unreliable narrator, that given her circumstances, she's maybe distorting or creating a reality that isn't necessarily real. It's her reality. It's her facade of sorts, that everyone's out to get her because she feels so unnerved that she's basically turning it into that. So the fact that we get a clear shot of what is not a real hamster, I think actually adds validity to that argument, that maybe there is some type of facade happening here from her perspective. And I didn't really think of it in that way. I was just more enamored by the choice to showcase how fake that thing looked. And it added a weird, quirky, horrific kind of twisted mentality to this movie. But I actually think there's some thematic nuance and purpose to it. I've never seen a movie very deliberately showcase its animatronic imperfections and actually use it wisely. That is really intriguing, and that's why the scene is one of my favorite scenes of the year.
Yeah, it's a great film, and you make a great point. It is fascinating that so much of her perspective isn't just unreliable, but it's almost as if she's living in another world altogether.
Yeah.
And that's certainly indicative of how she sees her apartment when she goes over there and looks into the void, and it becomes almost alien-like in a way, almost supernatural. So the fact that this hamster would carry that same tone in a sense that it feels like it's from another world, I do think that actually complements so much of the psychology that
I think it does.
Film.
Yeah. I've never uttered those words before. A fake hamster is actually really smart.
Good stuff. Love that a lot. All right, I'm going to a film that I know that you love, and in fact, this scene might actually be on your list somewhere. I don't know, but I'm going to the world of Marty Supreme, and I'm going with the final match that we see near the end of the film. And I think what's brilliant about this scene, and look, I understand that this scene is actually quite polarizing. There's been a lot of discourse recently around this scene.
I have thoughts.
I feel the need to defend it, which is partially why it is here, but also I think it is the best scene of the film, because it also leads to one of the more potent endings that we got throughout the year as well. But as we talked about in our review that we had last week with Jay Ledbetter, so much of that ending I do think is earned because of what happens in Japan with Marty and this final match that we do see. Now, I guess to add a little bit of pretext to it, it's important to note that, yes, much of the film, Marty is self-serving. Of course, everyone will admit that. We all know and understand that Marty is this self-centered hero. That's how he sees himself.
He's a brat.
He's a brat. Very much a brat. But all of that is born out of this pursuit of greatness. I believe we talked about that line when Kay asked him, well, what if you fail? And he says, it doesn't enter my consciousness, which is a great line to put on a t-shirt. And it is a great moment in this film because
did you
of Chalamet's
just discover a
performance.
new t-shirt idea?
I don't know. Perhaps I can toy with that a little bit, but I think there's some promise there. It is a great moment in this film. And that's exactly what makes the film so riveting to watch, because Marty just acts instinctively on that boldness. And Safdie, as a filmmaker, God bless him, he's incredible here. He just lets all of that unfold until we see some sort of ramification to his extreme choices. And because he's so manic and impulsive, he doesn't notice or care about how he's losing or affecting his relationships. And I love that the film doesn't really linger on that as much as it's just there for us to denote And because there's no moment of catharsis, at least for most of the film, you do sense Marty becoming more and more unreachable, which makes for an incredible duality because his obsession does lead to this competitive catharsis that we see at the end of the film. And the only reason, and this is the big difference, this is the reason I think it's earned, and maybe this is getting lost in the conversation, or maybe people just aren't feeling it as much as we are. I don't know. But for me, I think it's really important to understand that the only reason Marty gets to Japan in the first place is because he is forced into humility. He's forced into humility.
Yeah. And
I think that scene with, what is the character's name?
Oh, played by Kevin O'Leary.
Milton Rockwell.
Yeah.
Yeah, that scene with Milton at that party or at the theater, I can't remember where it takes place, but we see Marty begging for a ride to Japan. Yeah. And Milton gives it to him under one condition, that he drops trow, bends over, and they spank the shit out of him in front of everybody there.
Yeah,
and
with a paddle.
Marty, in his pursuit of greatness, is forced into humility. And then when he gets to Japan, he can't even participate in the competition. So he humbles himself with Milton, gets to Japan, can't even compete. And by the way, you're a show pony. You're going to be on stage with Endo and you're going to become the fool. And he's going to do his tricks and we're going to take some pictures and we're going to have some fun. And he decides to take it upon himself. And again, maybe you can excuse this as self-serving, and it is a little bit self-serving. He wants to have this match with Endo, but again, it's important to note
it's not just for himself.
It's not just for himself, and also it doesn't count. It doesn't count. This match, win or lose, it's not on the record books. So even if he wins, and spoiler alert, he does win, nobody cares. Nobody's going to know. It's not going to be in the papers. It's not part of the official competition. Marty goes home knowing that he was able to compete at the highest levels. And the only reason that matters to him is because he had to humble himself to get to that point, to have that epiphany, to have that realization. So despite how self-centered he is throughout a lot of this film, I do think that humility changes him in those final moments. And it reverses his psychology in a way which gives credence to that hospital scene. And there's a little bit more going on in that hospital scene that also gives more weight to that final moment. With when he arrives, he admits that he's the father, admits that he's a part of this, and all of that. Yeah. Like that admission itself, I think, is evidence of how he was humbled. Now, on the other side of fatherhood, could he regain some of that ego? Maybe. But at that moment in time, that humility did change his perspective.
I don't want to talk too much about this, primarily because I may have more to say about it on next week's show. But I will say this. The whole discourse around whether he is redeemed or not by the end is completely missing the point. Because this is a man this man has a lot of work to do to earn redemption, right? He is a despicable human being that did a lot of bad things to a lot of bad people, and many of those bad threads are still left unresolved by the end of this movie. But there is a shift in perspective that showcases he wants that redemption, and that's the difference.
And that's the difference. Yeah. And I think, and again, I know there's been some controversy around this, but like when he approaches Endo at the end of the match, I do think it is in genuine earnestness. Like, thank you for letting me have this moment.
Yeah.
It wasn't about beating Endo and look at me, I beat the number one guy in the world. Yeah. It had nothing to do with that as much as it was about him having a moment and realizing that he can compete. And that's all that he wanted.
Yeah.
And he was grateful. He found a gratefulness that didn't exist prior to being humbled, that wouldn't have ever come without that humility. But he did find that gratefulness. And I do think he meant it sincerely. I hope that you win that competition. And I agree with you. Like, I don't think the film is fully redeeming him at all anyway.
No.
But he is finding a humanity that was not there previously.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is what gives credence to that emotion at the end of the film.
Yeah. I have more thoughts about that actual ending. Maybe I'll say these thoughts on next week's episode, but there are particular things I feel very tempted to say that I'm trying to hold back on because I don't want to get myself in trouble. Maybe I'll talk to you about it offline. I'll simply say that. Maybe I'll cue you in as to what I'm thinking about and see what you think about. But I don't know if I'll get into those particular specifics when I talk about this scene. So I guess, spoiler alert, this is one of my favorite scenes of the year, but I don't have it in my 6 through 10. I'll talk about it later. But there are things about it that I am really itching to discuss, but I'm trying to find the best way to articulate it that doesn't get me in trouble. I'll simply say that.
Okay. There we go. I love it, though. I think that final match is great. The ping pong itself is also quite riveting. There's that element to the scene.
It's a great action scene. Yeah.
It's a great little action scene, but mostly I just love it for Marty, this perspective shift, the humility that he is forced into, but ultimately embraces, and kind of twists on his head in a way to give himself some closure. Because again, I think there's a world when he goes back where ping pong isn't that important to him afterwards. I mean, I'm sure he goes out and plays and maybe he hustles a little bit, but he may never play high level ping pong ever again.
Yeah.
Like, I think that exists for Marty after he gets back to the States.
Yeah.
And I think it's great. I deeply love it. I think all that emotion is well earned. It is my number 7.
It's good stuff.
Number 6, these are our final picks for this episode. We'll do our top 5 next week. So at number 6, Brendan, what do you got there?
My number 6 is a film that I don't think is even going to make my top 20 of the year. So this is one that I had to look back on. But there's one particular scene from this movie that I think many people would agree is actually one of the best scenes of the year. And it is another final scene from a movie. And I'm simply going to call this Aunt Gladys Gets Her Comeuppance.
Okay, yeah, this is a great moment. This is a very good honorable mention for me.
Yeah, this is clearly the final scene from Zach Crager's Weapons, the horror film from earlier this year. A film I did like, and there are elements of the movie that still linger for me. But as a movie, I'm not fully in love with how it ties these things together. I think it is a little sloppy, to be perfectly honest. But I do love the way it depicts catharsis at the end of this movie when all of these kids who have been victimized, or I guess I should say weaponized to a degree, by this particular individual, Aunt Gladys, played by Amy Madigan, in a very good performance that I know a lot of people are talking about. When the spell reverts and puts these kids in control, that they just comedically chase her down this entire neighborhood
really
and
fun.
then rip her apart. It's weirdly cathartic. And what I love about this scene too is that when it crystallizes, it doesn't relish in the catharsis. It actually relishes in pain and sorrow, as if this is not going to solve anything. The voiceover narration seems to suggest that many of these kids actually haven't really gotten back to reality just yet. They haven't even started speaking again, given this experience. And it actually adds a brief moment of recontextualizing the catharsis that we just saw. So in a way, this scene in a vacuum and how it shifts almost instantaneously before the end credits start rolling, I think is kind of clever. And I think that whole sequence then speaks to this overarching idea of childhood trauma as it's related to school incidents specifically. That's very much the clear metaphor at play here. I love the way this ending handles that. I do wish the film as a whole was maybe more seamless in depicting that idea. I do think it gets very messy in how it gets from A to B to C in order to arrive at that point. but I think that overall point and how it's portrayed in a very interesting way at the final minute is really powerful. I love how it's a moment of such catharsis where the audience in the theater is roaring in laughter, they're applauding, and then you sit back and realize, wait, this was actually kind of devastating. Just for children to have to experience that. And I love the way it twists that kind of thing.
Yeah, I do love that duality. It is on the surface quite entertaining to watch. It is. I love the thrill of watching those children chase her down. It's just incredible. You are right though about like how that crystallizes. You think about the aftermath of it and the trauma that those kids experience. There is certainly a level of poignancy to it, and I do love how that scene rides that line and gets to have its cake and eat it too. But yeah, them chasing her down is one of the visuals of the year for me, for sure.
It is. It pains me to say that I'm not fully in love with the movie as a whole.
Yeah,
because
I wish
that
I
scene
liked
is
it more too.
Yeah, like, and I still really like the movie. Maybe this is another one I'll try to give a rewatch to see if there are any hidden things that I just didn't catch on that first go round. Because it is a movie with some of the highest of highs of any movie this year, and some very mediocre bits tying it all together.
Yeah, great stuff. Do really like that a lot. My number 6, we're gonna go to a film we've already talked about, but it is a different scene. Okay. My number 6 is also If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You.
Good stuff.
Let's get a little teary-eyed here for a moment. Let's talk about the ending scene to If I Had Legs.
I figured you'd talk about this one. Yeah.
Yeah. I talked about this quite a bit when we reviewed it here on the show. And I do love how I'm trying to, again, work around, tiptoe around avoiding everything here being final scenes. That's why I went with the match and not the final scene of Marty Supreme, the confronting the abuser, and it was just an accident, not quite the final scene. Both of those might have been close, but technically not the final scene.
Yeah.
However, like sentimental value, If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. This is the final scene of the film. And what I love about this moment is how it ties back to the overall filmmaking and the tactic we see from Mary Bronstein, in the sense that we never see the daughter throughout any of the movie. We see the back of her as she's laying on the bed, or the side as she's going to sleep. But if she's in the scene, we never see her face. We only see her body as she's following her mom around. It is very much a first-person perspective movie in a lot of ways from Linda's perspective. And that is clearly intentional, given what we see here at the end of the film, where we do finally see her face as Linda is laying there on the beach, perhaps at the end of her rope, and feeling her most hopelessness. And then we see her face. And I was reminded of that moment earlier in the year in Fantastic Four. I talked about this, and it's actually a good honorable mention for me here as well. Because in Fantastic Four, there's that moment at the end when Sue is saved, not by any of her peers or family. She's saved by the child.
Yeah.
And that is very much what's going on here as well. It's Linda laying there on the beach, feeling as if there's nothing really for her to live for except for that face.
Yeah.
And for the timing of it, for us to see that face in that particular moment, and again, evoking that idea that sometimes your children save you, I think is absolutely incredible. Absolutely stunning. And to see Linda's reaction as she's laying there on the beach, to see the face hovering there and see her light up for the very first time in this film, to maybe embrace the idea that there is some hope. We hadn't seen an ounce of that in Linda up until that final moment. And I did find, weirdly, for a film that is somewhat bleak and devastating in tone through most of the film, you do get this ending that is quite antithetical once we see the daughter's face there, and it crushed me. I think it means a lot to see that when you're at your lowest moment, and I think it's quite evocative. I loved it.
And to showcase for our main character that she is finally able to look at what matters, and she's finally able to see what matters. The
As if she's
has
been kind of
ultimately
hiding from it or running from it.
And
at times
that's,
we do see her literally running from it, right?
Well, that's why I think, in a way, the cinematography for If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You is kind of like underrated. I don't think we're talking about it nearly enough, because the way it's shot creates this sensation that it's like it's like someone not looking someone in the eye or desperately avoiding eye contact with someone. That's the feeling I get while watching it, which is kind of representative of our main character in Linda, right? So like it is very first person in that regard, without being literally a first person movie in the same way as something like Nickel Boys was, right? But it kind of has a similar sensation without being as obvious with that. That's not easy. I can't imagine that being an easy thing to pull off.
No, not easy at all. But I do think the performance there from Rose Byrne certainly makes that moment work incredibly well. And Bronstein just, again, like I do love the physical and thematic interworkings there, the mechanics of Linda avoiding the daughter in a lot of ways, because I think of the moment when the daughter is asleep at night and Linda leaves her there alone and runs to the apartment. To get away for a moment, just to have some free time, or she goes down to the store to get alcohol, to go drink again away from the apartment. Or there's that scene when she goes to drop her off at that, what is that therapy building area where she's also supposed to go in. Yeah. But sometimes like she just she yells at one of the other mothers just to take the daughter away.
With you.
Yeah, exactly. And like just there's a lot of this film where she's just like, she clearly loves her daughter. We see her putting her to bed at night and feeding her, and there's a couple of endearing moments, but she's equally pawning her off or trying to get away as much as she can. And so like to hide the daughter, given that thematic underbelly, I think is a brilliant filmmaking touch. And then to show her face there for all those reasons, it's incredible. I mean, it's one of the best directed movies of the year.
I would agree.
As I'm concerned.
I would agree.
Stuff. We'll get to honorable mentions next week, as well as our top 5 scenes of the year. I will just quickly give this away because I had a different number 10, as I noted earlier.
Yeah.
Not a film in my top 30 at the moment, but I do think it's one of the better animated films of the year. I was going to go with K-pop Demon Hunters here, actually. This is a film that slowly I haven't been able to stop thinking about. And I think part of it is just, it is so good as a musical.
Yeah.
It's kind of reminiscent to our conversation on The Testament of Ann Lee, in the sense that I don't think it's a perfect movie, but the execution is so good that
it's so sincere.
Especially as a musical, it's really good. And the moment, like the song that registers the most to me is What It Sounds Like, that we hear near the end of the film. And I don't know if you've actually listened and paid attention to the lyrics of this song, but they're surprisingly quite biting. They're
I agree.
moving.
I actually think that's the best song in the movie. I know Golden is getting all the recognition because it's the pop hit. It's the immediacy of that song, and it is certainly more immediately gratifying. But This Is What It Sounds Like has a profound energy to it.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. like I wish that I had time to just go through here and read the lyrics, but there's a lot here as far as, them talking about letting the demons get between them, that they're not here out on their own, that maybe we were cowards, we were liars, but we're dreamers, we're fighters. And if you dive into the fire, I'll be right here by your side. Like,
yeah.
And the way those lyrics are sung is extremely potent and emotional. Like I deeply love it. Like it's by far the best song in that film.
I agree with that. I do agree with you on that as far as it being the best song in that film. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I like it really, truly, genuinely is one of my favorite scenes of the year. So I guess I'll have that as like an 11, I guess, in this sense. Because again, when I thought about Avatar, I was like, man, that's just too perfect
if
for
it's
what the rest
sticking
of
to
my
you,
list is going to look like.
So I'll once again reiterate that my number 11 was the final scene / final shot from If It Was Just an Accident. So I guess we'll refrain from going into all of our honorable mentions now, but we'll just simply say what the one that just missed our respective top 10s were.
Yeah. Yeah, because that was in my 10 as of earlier this afternoon.
Gotcha.
So anyway, just wanted to point that out. But yeah, we'll talk more about honorable mentions and the top 5 next week. So with that, we will go ahead and wind down here. Just a reminder that we have reviews this week of Park Chan-wook's No Other Choice. That was a lot of fun. Trying to get into all of those fun little nuances. And also the aforementioned The Testament of An Lee. I will also have a review this week of Rental Family. That is going to be coming out. New Chasing the Gold, I believe. I don't have the schedule in front of me, but I believe they are doing predictions for Critics' Choice because that is happening this weekend. So you could be on the lookout for that. New Women in Session at the end of the week as well. And both Chasing the Gold and Women in Session, they're doing great work. Jaylan Salah was on Chasing the Gold last week talking about Die My Love, and it is a must listen. Very, very good. Yeah. I do urge people to go and check it out. And Women in Session doing phenomenal work as well. So definitely go and check out those shows. Check out the reviews. With that said, Brennan, am I forgetting anything? Subscribe to the show, of course.
Yes,
subscribe,
please.
Leave reviews, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, let us know how we're doing. We're starting to get a few more comments on YouTube, which I appreciate, and I'm sure you appreciate as well. I love the engagement there, and to see the growth there is really exciting to see. And with the award show coming up, you want to be lockstep with us because we're going to have a lot of great things to talk about in the next few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll have more details next week on what that looks like if you're new to the show. If you've been with us for a while, it's going to end up being the same old thing. So don't worry.
7 hours.
We'll have a lot of fun. But we'll break all of that down next week. I have more Stingray updates as well. I just don't have the time this week or next week. But boy, do I have updates. Don't worry. I know you texted me some of them, JD. I still haven't had a chance to listen to the ones that you texted me. So I need to watch those when I get some time. I had such incredible updates today that I didn't even just send Brendan pictures. I took video. I said, watch this.
I'm like, I've got 3 screaming kids around me. My nieces and nephew are around. I can't hear it.
Well, and the irony is you'll hear my kids in those videos as well. But I wanted you to hear, I love that channel so much. So I'll have updates. Don't worry. We'll get to that on the other side of the award show. It's just that time of year.
All right.
With that said, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast.